Today is March 7th. Welcome to Big Book Daily. My name is Rob. I am an alcoholic. It is a thrill, honor, and joy to be here with you today as we journey through the Big Book of Alcoholics Anonymous and the 12 Steps and 12 Traditions. Today out of the Big Book, we are on Chapter 4, We Agnostics. We'll be reading page 54. Out of the 12 and 12, we are wrapping up Step 7, I believe, by reading page 76. And of course, we'll read the 24 hours a day and daily reflection. So with that, hope y'all are doing well this morning, my friends. Once again, we're alive today. Woke up sober. What a blessing. That in itself is a blessing. And hey, it's Saturday, so maybe after this you can get caught up in your Saturday morning cartoons with a big bowl of cereal. But yeah, let's go ahead and get to the good stuff. All right, my friends, so if you recall from yesterday's reading, on page 53, we read a pretty couple of powerful lines here. We had to fearlessly face the proposition that either God is everything or else he is nothing. God either is or he isn't. What was our choice to be? And we also talked about reason and how oftentimes we have to trade old ideas for new. And we are going to explore that idea a little bit more on page 54. We found, too, that we had been worshipers. What a state of mental gooseflesh that used to bring on. Had we not variously worshipped people, sentiment, things, money, and ourselves? And then, with a better motive, had we not worshipfully beheld the sunset, the sea, or a flower? Who of us had not loved something or somebody? How much did these feelings, these loves, these worships have to do with pure reason? Little or nothing, we saw at last. Were not these things the tissues out of which our lives were constructed? Did not these feelings, after all, determine the course of our existence? It was impossible to say that we had no capacity for faith or love or worship. In one form or another, we've been living by faith and little else. Imagine life without faith. Were nothing left but pure reason, it wouldn't be life. But we believed in life. Of course we did. We cannot prove life in the sense that you can prove a straight line is the shortest distance between 2 points, yet there it was. Could we still say the whole thing was nothing but a mass of electrons, created out of nothing, meaning nothing, whirling on to a destiny of nothingness? Of course we couldn't. The electrons themselves seemed more intelligent than that, at least so the chemist said. Hence, we saw that reason is in everything. Neither is reason, as most of us use it, entirely dependable, though it emanate from our best minds. What about the people who proved that man could never fly? Yet we had been seeing another kind of flight, a spiritual liberation from this world. People who rose above their problems. They said God made these things possible, and we only smiled. We had seen spiritual release, but like to tell ourselves it wasn't true. Out of the 12 and 12, we're on Step 7. Humbly asked him to remove our shortcomings. And on page 75 yesterday, we read a pretty powerful line right at the bottom here. A great turning point in our lives came when we sought for humility as something we really wanted, rather than as something we must have. It marked the time when we could commence to see the full implication of Step 7, humbly asked him to remove our shortcomings. So we are going to wrap up this page right here, page 76, we're going to wrap up the chapter by reading page 76. Sorry, it's still a little early. As we approach the actual taking of Step 7, it might be well if we AAs inquire once more just what our deeper objectives are. Each of us would like to live at peace with himself and with his fellows. We would like to be assured that the grace of God can do for us what we cannot do for ourselves. We have seen that character defects based upon short-sighted or unworthy desires are the obstacles that block our path toward these objectives. We now clearly see that we've been making unreasonable demands upon ourselves, upon others, and upon God. The chief activator of our defects has been self-centered fear. Primarily fear that we would lose something we already possessed or fail to get something that we demanded. Living upon a basis of unsatisfied demands, we were in a state of continual disturbance and frustration. Therefore, no peace was to be had unless we could find a means of reducing these demands. The difference between a demand and a simple request is plain to anyone. The seventh step is where we make the change in our attitude, which permits us, with humility as our guide, to move out from ourselves toward others and toward God. The whole emphasis of step 7 is on humility. It is really saying to us that we now ought to be willing to try humility in seeking the removal of our other shortcomings, just as we did when we admitted that we were powerless over alcohol and came to believe that a power greater than ourselves could restore us to sanity. If that degree of humility could enable us to find grace by which such a deadly obsession could be banished, then there must be hope of the same result respecting any other problem we could possibly have. "24 hours a day, March 7th. AA Thought for the Day. There are two important things that we have to do if we want to get sober and stay sober. First, having admitted that we're helpless before alcohol, we have to turn our alcoholic problem over to God and trust Him to take care of it for us. This means asking Him every morning for the strength to stay sober that day and thanking Him every night. It means really leaving the problem in God's hands and not reaching out and taking the problem back to ourselves. Second, having given our drinking problem to God, we must cooperate with Him by doing something about it ourselves. Am I doing these two things? Meditation for the day. I must prepare myself by doing each day what I can do to develop spiritually and help others to do so. God tests me and trains me and bends me to His will. If I'm not properly trained, I cannot meet the test when it comes. I must want God's will for me above all else. I must not expect to have what I am not prepared for. This preparation consists of quiet communion with God every day and gradually gaining the strength I need. Prayer for the day. I pray that I may really try to do God's will in all my affairs. I pray that I may do all I can to help others find God's will for them. Daily Reflection, March 7th. The key is willingness. Once we place the key of willingness in the lock and have the door ever so slightly open, we find that we can always open it some more. 12 Steps and 12 Traditions, page 35. The willingness to give up my pride and self-will to a power greater than myself has proved to be the only ingredient absolutely necessary to solve all my problems today. Even the smallest amount of willingness, if sincere, is sufficient to allow God to enter and take control over any problem, pain, or obsession. My level of comfort is in direct relation to the degree of willingness I possess at any given point to give up my self-will and allow God's will to be manifested in my life. With the key of willingness, my worries and fears are powerfully transformed into serenity. All right, my friends, that concludes today's reading, and man, some great stuff today. Gosh, I love that last reading, the key of willingness. I love that last line. I should have shut my book. Let me open it back up here. It says, with the key of willingness, my worries and fears are powerfully transformed into serenity. I noticed that in my experience that if I'm willing to change, if I put in a little bit of effort, instead of closing my mind off, right? I have noticed, and we were talking about this yesterday, the God of my understanding goes way more than halfway. I gained so many more things. Honestly, I was just willing to stop drinking, and I would do anything it took to stop drinking, right? But I had no idea all the things I would gain. And that kind of ties into the 12 and 12, which is what I wanted to talk about. Right here, the very last line of the chapter on 76. If that degree of humility could enable us to find the grace, there it is again, there's that word, by which such a deadly obsession could be banished, then there must be hope of the same result respecting any other problem we could possibly have. I just thought when I came to the rooms and did the steps that I'd stop drinking. I had no idea that these 12 suggestions right here would give me a much deeper relationship with my higher power than I could have ever dreamed. A lot of people from different faiths and different backgrounds, they come into the rooms and they're able to do these steps, and it kind of bolsters their faith or kind of reinvents their faith. For me, I'm a Christian, and I always believed in God, and I always believed in what the Bible teaches, but I still had so much fear and still had so much distrust in my heart, right? But by doing the steps, I realized that this isn't just about alcohol. Just like step 12 says, practicing these principles in all my affairs. So, like the 12 and 12 talks about a lot, the 7 deadly sins, right? I mean, I'm a human being, and I wrestle with a lot of those, probably all 7. It's not just the drinking thing. The drinking was the symptom for me. But I love the I love the word practice. A lot of times when we see elite athletes and stuff, of course, I'm a big hockey nut. So when you see like the All-Star game and you go, oh my gosh, how in the world do these folks have so much skill? How in the world can they do the things that they do? But a lot of times we don't see the countless hours they put into practice and working at it every day. The not so glamorous part, right? Well, for me, that can be the practice of these principles of getting up in the morning, having that quiet time with my higher power, praying, getting my mind off of myself, helping others, carrying out His will for my life, doing this podcast every day to remind myself, because I have short-term memory loss, like for real. It's practice, right? But by doing these things in the reps every single day, and maybe by attraction rather than promotion, they'll want whatever it is you have in your sobriety. So about that, if you are sober today, my friend, I hope you realize that you're a miracle. And those who love you are very proud of you, and you're giving a great gift to everybody around you. And you have a unique superpower to help the next suffering alcoholic out there. We do. I don't know why I said you, it's we. We can help today. And if you're not sober, I hope you know that you're a miracle as well, that you have great worth and value, and that your story is not done yet. And I just pray that you'd have the honesty, open-mindedness, and willingness to make that first step toward change today, and you don't have to do it alone. The first word in the steps is we. And finally, as always, I don't speak on behalf of AA, NA, Al-Anon, any other sect or denomination. I am just a joyful drunk. Sober today by the grace of my higher power. Honored to be here. And if we are given another set of 24 hours, my friends, I sincerely look forward to seeing you right back here tomorrow.